Imagine being the last ember of a dying flame, a colony adrift in the void, a lone sanctuary of human survival, while an unstoppable alien armada carves a path of annihilation across the cosmos. They were once billions. Now, only thousands remain. The last human colony clings to the edge of extinction. But how did we get here? The end of humanity didn't come as a slow decline. It came as a sudden, merciless purge, executed by an enemy so ancient, so powerful, that our existence was nothing more than an anomaly in their eyes. Decades ago, humanity stood at the precipice of greatness. The Nexus Gate was our crowning achievement, a quantum lattice woven into the fabric of space-time, capable of folding distances so vast that entire galaxies could be traversed in an instant. With it, humanity had finally broken free from the confines of its solar system. At first, the gate was our triumph. It linked our scattered colonies, created trade routes across the stars, and promised an era of limitless expansion. But the moment we activated it on a galactic scale, we unknowingly sent a signal, a beacon, and something was listening. The first signs of disaster were subtle. Deep space listening posts vanishing, entire research outposts going dark, ships lost, without a trace. Then came the anomalies. Light from distant stars distorted as if space itself was being bent by an unseen force. Energy signatures that defied all known physics flickered across our senses. And then, the screams. It started with a transmission. A garbled distress call from the deep space colony of Epsilon Prime. The message was nearly incomprehensible, static, shrieks of panic, words spoken in broken, fragmented bursts. But one thing was clear. Something had arrived. A fleet was dispatched. Some of our most advanced warships, equipped with rail cannons that could pierce moons and shields powered by artificial stars, set out to investigate. They never returned. Then the planets began to fall. One by one, entire star systems went dark. Our defenses, built to withstand any known enemy, proved useless. This wasn't war. It was extermination. And we didn't even know who was killing. Thus then we saw them. The Olvasa, they were not conquerors. They did not negotiate, they did not offer demands, they did not even acknowledge our attempts to communicate. To them we were not a civilization. We were a corruption. A mistake that had breached into their domain. Their ships were unlike anything we had ever encountered. Vast monolithic constructs of shifting black metal as if forged from living darkness. Their weapons did not fire in bursts of light or streams of plasma, but in ripples of nothingness, erasures of existence itself. Planets did not explode. They vanished. Even the laws of physics seemed to warp in their presence. Gravity twisted. Time bled. Entire space stations folded into themselves as if the universe was rejecting them. We fought. By the time Earth's turn came, the solar defense fleet had assembled every remaining warship, millions of vessels, a force unlike anything seen before. It did not matter. The battle lasted less than 6 hours. When it was over, Earth was no longer there. The last survivors, scientists, soldiers, civilians, fled in the chaos. A desperate exodus to the outer rim of known space, to the last place the Olvasa might overlook, a barren, rocky moon orbiting a dying star. They called it Haven, but Haven was not a paradise. It was never meant to be inhabited. It had been a mining colony once, its atmosphere thin, its surface cracked and unstable. Its underground tunnels became the last refuge of humankind. Inside, the survivors built what they could. Shielded domes to protect against the radiation storms, hydroponic farms struggling to produce enough food, the last remnants of the military trying to form a defense. But deep down everyone knew the truth. This was not a home, this was a tomb waiting to be filled. And then came the final blow. A deep space relay drone, battered and barely functional, drifted into Haven's outer perimeter. It carried a single transmission looping on repeat, the last recorded message from an old listening post beyond the dead stars. 5 words. They have found you. Run. Haven's long-range sensors flared with warnings. The sky, once empty, now burned with unnatural energy signatures. Thousands of Olvasar warships, emerging from the void like silent harbingers of doom. There was no time, no hope to run. The last human stronghold was now a battlefield, and the war for survival had begun. Before we jump into this epic tale, subscribe to XenoChronicles for the most intense sci-fi battles, legendary warriors, and universe-shaking wars. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fight. The air inside Haven was thick with tension. A silence heavier than the vacuum of space itself settled over the underground colony as every available eye turned toward the command screens. There, the undeniable truth flickered in cold, unfeeling data. Thousands of Olvasar warships, forming an unbreakable wall of darkness in the void. This was not a fleet preparing for battle. This was an execution squad. Admiral Elias Varin, one of the last remaining high-ranking officers of the fallen Terran Defense Corps, stood rigid at the center of Haven's war room. His face, carved by years of battle and loss, betrayed no emotion. But inside he knew what this meant. The end had arrived. A soft chime broke the silence, a proximity alert. The Olvasar fleet was moving, their approach eerily slow, like a predator savoring the final moments before a kill. Their technology was beyond comprehension, their weapons unlike anything humanity had ever faced. They did not fire kinetic rounds. They did not launch swarms of missiles or streams of plasma. Instead, their weapons unmade reality. Varin turned. To his second-in-command, Commander Ayla Cade, whose piercing green eyes reflected the scrolling battle data on the screens. She was younger, once a rising star in the fleet, but those days were gone. Her uniform was worn, her once pristine officer's insignia scratched and battered. There was no longer a rank to uphold, only survival. "We don't have the firepower for this," she muttered, half to herself. "If we had even one dreadnought-class warship, maybe, but we have nothing." Varin exhaled slowly. "Then we make do with nothing." He turned toward the assembled officers, scientists, and soldiers, what little remained of humanity's best. They weren't warriors anymore, they were survivors, and survivors had one thing left: desperation. Haven had no fleet, no grand warships. What remained of humanity's military had been reduced to a handful of scavenged frigates, old colony transports, and makeshift gunships pieced together from mining equipment. Their defenses, a planetary shield grid designed to withstand asteroid impacts, useless against weapons that could erase entire worlds. But they had something else. Buried deep beneath Haven's crust was the obsidian core, a power source left behind by an ancient civilization long before humans ever set foot on this barren moon. Its energy signature defied analysis, pulsing with an unnatural frequency, like the heartbeat of something alive. It had been dormant for centuries, until now. Deep in the colony's research wing, Dr. Orion Vasquez, one of the last surviving scientists from the Earth Research Division, stood before the core's containment field. The energy readings were spiking, reacting to the approaching Olvasar fleet. "It knows they're here," he whispered. Cade, standing beside him, clenched her jaw. "We've studied this thing for years, and we still don't understand it. How do we even know it's on our side?" "We don't," Vasquez admitted, "but it might be our only chance." Above them, the first wave of the Olvasar fleet descended. The black monoliths of their warships shimmered with a sickly distortion, like mirages of something that wasn't entirely there. Then reality cracked. The first strike was not fire, it was erasure. A ripple of void energy cascaded downward, warping the very fabric of existence. The outermost defense stations, already frail, simply ceased to be. No explosion, no debris, just gone. The underground city trembled as alarms screamed across Haven. Emergency sirens howled. The remaining pilots sprinted to their ships, knowing that any attempt at resistance was suicide, but fighting was all they had left. The first wave of human vessels ascended into the void. Fighters, scavenged from what was left of the old fleet, weaved through the sky like insects against an unstoppable storm. Railguns fired, missiles streaked through the darkness. But the Olvasar didn't even need shields. They were beyond such things. Their ships moved like whispers, blurring in and out of physical space. Human weapons passed through them as if attacking a ghost. Then, with precise, effortless strokes, the Olvasar retaliated. One by one, the human ships blinked out of existence. Gone. In the war room, Varen slammed his fist against the console. "Damn it, we need more time." Below ground, the obsidian core pulsed violently. Its energy output spiked beyond measurable levels, causing the containment field to flicker. The scientists recoiled, alarms flashing red as the readings escalated. "Something's happening," Vasquez shouted. And then, without warning, it spoke, not in words, not in sound, but in thought. A voice slithered into the minds of everyone in Haven. It was ancient, vast. It carried the weight of eons, of forgotten wars and cosmic horrors beyond understanding. "You are not ready." Vasquez's breath caught in his throat. "Well, what?" The voice echoed again, deeper, more resonant. "You awakened the gate. You called them here. You were warned." Cade clenched her fists. "Then help us. We don't have time for riddles." The core pulsed again, and something changed. Outside, in the vast emptiness of space, the Olvasar ships hesitated. The eerie fluidity of their movement faltered. They sensed it. Something else had awakened. The readings on the monitors fluctuated wildly. Then the energy surged. The ground beneath Haven trembled as the core's power flooded through the colony's systems. The dying planetary shields surged back to life. Only, this time, they didn't just deflect energy. They absorbed it, and then returned fire. A pulse erupted from Haven's surface, an impossible eldritch burst of energy that struck the nearest Olvasar warship. And for the first time in recorded history, an Olvasar ship died. The vessel didn't simply vanish. It collapsed inward, as if consumed by the very nothingness it had wielded against others. A guttural shriek, not of sound, but of something deeper, wrong, echoed across every comm channel. The Olvasar fleet hesitated. Cade's eyes widened. "We hurt them," Varen exhaled sharply. "We hurt them." In the void, the alien warships regrouped, no longer moving with effortless precision, no longer untouchable. For the first time, they knew uncertainty, but they were not retreating. They were adapting, and the next wave would be even worse. Haven had bought itself seconds, maybe minutes, but the battle was far from over, because now the Olvasar knew that humanity had something hidden deep beneath the surface of this barren moon, and they would stop at nothing to claim it. The silence that followed the destruction of the Olvasar ship was deafening. Across Haven, soldiers, scientists and civilians alike froze in stunned disbelief. For centuries, humanity had whispered about the Olvasar in fear, speaking of them as an unstoppable force, immortal beings beyond comprehension. But now, for the first time, they had bled. A single kill, a single victory. But it changed everything. "Commander." Thyla Cade stood at the war room's central console, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The holographic projections of the Olvasar fleet flickered around her, thousands of warships forming an unbreakable blockade around the moon. And yet, for the first time, they hesitated. "They're recalibrating," Admiral Elias Varen murmured. His voice was quiet, yet the weight behind it was suffocating. The Olvasar were not retreating. No, they were far too advanced, too methodical for such a thing. Instead, they were adapting, shifting their strategies, analyzing what had just happened. And the next time they struck, they would not make the same mistake. Cade clenched her jaw. "If we can kill one, we can kill more." But Vasquez, the lead scientist, barely heard her. He was still staring at the monitors displaying the obsidian core, its energy readings pulsing with incomprehensible power. His fingers twitched over the console, sweat beading on his brow. "The core isn't just a power source," he murmured. "It's aware." Varen turned, his cold gaze locking onto Vasquez. "Explain." The scientist swallowed. "When it spoke to us, it wasn't just a transmission, it was something deeper, a direct psychic imprint. It knows what the Olvasar are. It's seen them before." Cade's blood ran cold. "Before? You're saying this thing She gestured toward the pulsating mass of impossible energy. Has fought them before? Vasquez nodded slowly. And it lost. A long silence followed. Varan exhaled. That doesn't mean it will lose again. He turned toward the tactical display. The Olvasar fleet was repositioning. Their initial precision had been replaced by something else, something more erratic, less machine-like. They didn't. Expect resistance, Cade muttered. They expected extermination, but now that extermination was no longer certain, and that made them angry. In the depths of space, aboard the largest of the Olvasar warships, something stirred. It was not a leader, for the Olvasar had no need for such things. They were a collective, a singular entity fractured into many, but there were fragments of that entity that were older, more specialized. The one known in human translations as the Harbinger unfurled its awareness across the battlefield. It had existed since before human history, before the rise and fall of civilizations far greater than Earth's fleeting empire. It had witnessed the birth of stars and the screams of dying worlds, and yet what it sensed from the core was something impossible, a remnant of an ancient adversary, one that should have been long extinguished. The Harbinger did not feel fear, for fear was an emotion reserved for the weak, but it did recognize one undeniable truth. This battle was no longer routine extermination. This was war, and the Olvasar did not lose wars. Aboard Haven, alarms screamed through the colony's underground corridors. The next wave was coming. The people of Haven, scientists, engineers, civilians, the last remnants of the human race, were scrambling to reinforce their defenses, but there were none. There were no energy barriers strong enough, no starships powerful enough to stand against what was coming, only the core. In the war room, Varan issued orders with cold efficiency, his voice slicing through the chaos like a blade. We need to establish direct interface with the core. If it has knowledge of the Olvasar, we need it now. Vasquez hesitated. Admiral, I don't think you understand what you're asking. The core isn't some artificial intelligence we can plug into. It's something older, something alive. I don't care what it is, Varan snapped. If it can fight, it needs to fight now. Cade looked at Vasquez. Can we communicate? With it? The scientist hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he moved toward the control panel, fingers hovering over the interface. I can try. He initiated the link. At first, nothing happened. Then, the war room was consumed by darkness. Not a mere absence of light. This was something deeper, an unraveling of reality itself. For a fraction of a second, everyone in the room felt as if they were somewhere else, a void beyond time, beyond space. And then the voice returned. You are not ready. Varan clenched his fists. Then make us ready. The presence shifted, its attention fully locking onto him. You do not understand what you face. Cade stepped forward. Then tell us, show us. A pause. And then, with a pulse of energy, the knowledge came. Not in words, not in data, but in pure understanding. Memories that were not their own flooded into their minds. A war waged in the distant past, between beings far older than humanity. The Olvasar were not conquerors. They were not invaders. They were executors, sent to extinguish civilizations that reached beyond their place in the cosmic order. They had done this before, countless times, across countless galaxies, and every species that had resisted had been erased, except for one, the creators of the obsidian core. They had fought the Olvasar to a standstill. They had found a way to hurt them, just as humanity had done moments ago. But in the end, it hadn't been enough. Their civilization had been wiped from existence, leaving behind only relics and warnings. Now that knowledge, those weapons belonged to humanity. But there was a cost. The core's energy levels surged violently, shaking the very foundations of Haven. The interface displays overloaded, sparking with uncontrolled power. Cade gritted her teeth. What's happening? Vasquez's eyes widened. The core. It's activating something. Outside, in the vastness of space, the Olvasar fleet moved as one, their warships forming an intricate lattice of energy. They were preparing to unleash a final cataclysmic strike, one that would erase Haven from existence. But before they could fire, the core answered. The entire moon trembled as ancient mechanisms deep beneath the surface roared to life. Massive plates of obsidian metal shifted, revealing something buried for millennia. A construct the size of a city, its form unknowable, shifting between states of matter and energy. A weapon. One not built by humans, but one now bound to them. Varin's voice was barely a whisper. My God! The Olvasar hesitated once more. They recognized what this was. They had seen it before. And for the first time, they hesitated in fear. The Olvasar did not fear. For all of history, they had been the great executioners of the cosmos, an unstoppable force that erased civilizations the moment they reached beyond their place. They had seen countless species try to resist. They had seen weapons built in desperation, and every time they had crushed those defiant enough to challenge their dominion. But now something was different. The construct that had emerged from beneath Haven's surface was an impossibility, an echo of an ancient enemy that should have been long dead. The very fact of its existence sent silent, imperceptible ripples through the Olvasar collective consciousness, and for the first time in recorded history, they hesitated. On Haven, the war room was in chaos. Alarms blared. Power conduits overloaded. The obsidian core surged with energy beyond all known measurements, its pulsing form twisting between the physical and something far stranger. Cade could barely breathe. The sight before her, the colossal, ever-shifting construct now rising from the moon's surface, was something out of myth. It was alive. Not in the way a machine was alive, not like an artificial intelligence responding to input. It was something deeper, something aware. Vasquez's voice was barely a whisper. This isn't just a weapon, it's a being. Varin gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus on what mattered. Can we control it? The scientist hesitated. No, but I think we can guide it. The ground beneath them rumbled as the construct fully emerged. It was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. A city-sized entity of black metal and shimmering void light, its form constantly shifting between solid and ethereal. Great spires rose, from its back like the broken ribs of a forgotten god, and within its core burned a power older than stars. It was a remnant of a war long forgotten, and it was waking up. High above the moon, the Olvasar reacted. No longer was this a simple extermination mission. No longer was this just another primitive species needing to be erased. This was something far worse. This was a contamination, a corruption of the Great Order. The Harbinger, the prime intelligence of the Olvasar fleet, reached out across the void. Its command was instant, absolute. The fleet moved in perfect synchrony, shifting into an attack formation not seen in eons, and then they fired. 1,000 beams of annihilation energy cut through the void, each one capable of turning entire planets to dust. They struck the construct in unison, a concentrated effort to end this abomination before it could fully awaken. For a moment, the sky was nothing but blinding light. For a moment, Haven itself trembled on the brink of annihilation. And then the light collapsed inward. The construct absorbed it. No explosion. No damage. Only silence. Then, with a single, shuddering movement, it turned its attention toward the Olvasar fleet. They have come again. The voice did not speak in words. It did not transmit in sound. It was every human, every Olvasar, every being in its presence felt its thoughts as though they were their own. They will not succeed this time. And then it attacked. Reality itself twisted. Space broke. The construct did not fire beams of energy. It did not launch missiles or release projectiles. Instead, it reached. An invisible force, a fundamental rewriting of physics, gripped the nearest Olvasar warship. The vessel, a colossal dreadnought, was ancient, invincible by all known measures. It collapsed in on itself, not like an explosion, not like destruction. It simply ceased, as though it had never existed. The Olvasar fleet reeled. But the EE construct did not stop. It moved with a slow, inevitable purpose. A force of nature, a god of war reborn from the ashes of a dead civilization. One by one, the Olvasar ships began to vanish. In the war room, the humans could only watch in stunned silence. What? What is it doing? Cade whispered. Vasquez was shaking. I think it's erasing them from existence. Varine's expression was unreadable. Can it stop? The scientist swallowed. I don't know, because this wasn't just a counterattack. This wasn't just defense, this was vengeance. In the depths of space, the Harbinger realized the truth too late. This war was not over. It had never been over. It had simply paused, and now it had resumed. With its fleet vanishing, with the great extermination unraveling, the Harbinger issued a final desperate command. Retreat. For the first time in history, the Olvasar ran. Their remaining ships, those that had not been erased, folded space around them, tearing into the void and vanishing into exile. And just like that, the battle was over. The silence that followed was unbearable. The construct remained above Haven, its form shifting, its power undiminished. Then it spoke one last time. The cycle has ended. But the war is not finished. Cade stepped forward, heart pounding. What war? Who were you? The response came not in words but in knowledge, visions of a past long buried. The Olvasar were never gods. They were never invincible. They had been created, built by something even older, something that had once ruled the stars, something that had been defeated. And now, with the Olvasar in retreat, with their great extermination undone. Their creators would wake up, and they would come looking. The construct began to fade, its form dissolving back into the void. It had done its duty, it had broken the cycle. But it was only a first step, a warning, a beginning. As the last remnants of its voice echoed through the colony, a final message burned into the minds of those who had witnessed the impossible. Prepare. They are coming. And so, the last human colony stood victorious. But the war for the future of the universe had only just begun. What do you think? Did this ending leave you breathless? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more mind-blowing sci-fi battles, subscribe to XenoChronicles now, because the war is just beginning.